Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, some fields are having crusting issues. What are your options? How long should you wait to plant corn after applying Anhydrous? Ben and Turk give their insight. Take a look at the latest USDA report. Thanks for tuning in to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe.
Hi, this is Joe Merschman. Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we got Turk and Ben, and people are busy, so let's keep this short and get back in the field, okay?
That's right. What a change 7 days has made in temperature and in moisture. Things weren't drying out as quickly as I think we would like to have seen them with the humidities that we've had. So we had a lot of discussion this week with some of our agronomists and sales managers, and things just didn't dry out with 90 degree temps and 90 degree humidity, or 90% humidity. So there's a lot of guys pushing the envelope on trying to get stuff opened up and dried out and trying to get product stuck in the ground.
It looked like it had rained every morning, just about.
Right, so that's helping us with what the first conversation that I kind of wanted to talk about, that moisture coming back up has definitely helped us with getting beans and corn that were planted the last week of April out of the ground, because in certain areas we are fighting crusting issues. So I got a couple pictures here of what locally the crusting kind of looks like. The projected rain for Friday evening into Saturday morning is probably going to help out a lot with those. But what are some of the things that you think about, Turk, before you get your rotary hoe out?
Well, again, rotary hoes are really great for doing two things: loosen the soil up, drying it out. And we have used a rotary hoe just to dry things out without a crop in the ground, and that does work very, very well. Light, fast, and break any crust or seal that's out there. And we've been hearing that too, that the ground's slow to dry out because it is sealed over so much from all the rain. And so again, that rotary hoe can help do that. But the ground is cracking in a lot of areas now, and once the ground starts cracking, then it'll dry out more. But again, loosening that up will help. But the rotary hoe, as far as if you've got the crop in the ground and you do have a crust, rotary hoe is a great tool to get over there. Again, just break that crust and open it up a little bit, and as long as it's not like concrete, and it'll work. They'll do wonders.
At what stage, how close to the beans coming out of the ground do you typically either pull the trigger or not pull the trigger?
Well, that's the tough one. That's the tough one. On corn, you can, I don't worry about it at all. But on soybeans, if that head's just right there, you're going to lose some of them. You are going to lose some of them, but you have to go back and look and see if you're doing more harm than more good, and how many's going to make it if you don't, and how many are going to make it that you did. And so you are going to lose some, but that's just the nature of the business we're in.
Yep. So some of the things that I'm looking for, if that half-inch crust and you don't have any beans out of the ground and there's nothing, no beans are pushing and seeing anything, if you have that half-inch, and even if you have a few beans that are popping out of the ground, but the majority of them are under a quarter-inch or a half-inch crust, I have a tendency to pull the trigger. And with the rotary hoe, you're always pulling the trigger as soon as you possibly can, because if you wait during that time frame too long, you're breaking necks, and most of the time that Rotary Hoe Decision was probably a Wednesday, Tuesday decision of this week, in my opinion.
I don't know how many did get rotary hoed, but I know that, like you said, the moisture that we did get, that moisture come up, did help a lot of corn get out of the ground. Yep. And I don't know if it helped the beans all that much, but a lot of corn to get out of the ground. The temperature is what's probably the ground, the soil temperatures is what's probably done more good than anything to give them some push.
Yep, no, I completely agree. So the other question that I'd got a handful of times this week was the Anhydrous question, on how long we can wait for Anhydrous. So I did a little bit of looking, and there's a handful of companies that talk about, or a handful of either seed companies or blogs and guys talking back and forth about what their experience has been. It kind of seems like the common thread is, at a very minimum, 3 days guys like to see, but that 7 7, 8, 9 days is where you're really the most safe. But some of the things to do differently if you are putting anhydrous down is you want to make sure that anhydrous is at least 7 inches in the ground. So essentially anhydrous creates a 6-inch circle around the shank that it's put in. So if you're putting that anhydrous shank down 7 inches in the ground at least, you're giving your seed as much protection as possible to get the 2 weeks for that seed to, put a radical down, get established, have a root system. Hopefully there's rain involved and that dilutes your anhydrous out, because you really want that dilution process to happen before you get much of a root system on, because if you burn the roots, you will see it by the time the corn is 3-4 inches tall.
And it has to be sealing. Correct. Because if you see in smoke behind that anhydrous applicator, you have anhydrous all the way up that slot. So there'll be, and then you will see that. So 2 things: get it in the ground, make sure it's sealing.
I know there's guys in north of Interstate 80. One of our truck drivers was telling us that they just stopped putting smoke on because corn is the more important thing to do at this point in time. They'll come back in side dress, and that's the good thing about nitrogen is there's plenty of different options on how to get it on. It's just what's the risk assessment and what's the cost difference between the 2 different options.
Yeah, we got most of it on last fall because we had such a great fall, and we had a window earlier this year that some got on, but there hasn't been a lot moving here lately until just this week.
Right. Some of the other things that I'm thinking about during this time frame is that all of our MS testing is going to be delayed at this point, because they are as far behind, obviously, as the farmers are. So that's going to affect different varieties on how things go, because a lot of the plots haven't been put in the ground yet. So it's one of the things I'm going to be paying attention to is that delayed planting and what it does to different varieties. So we're definitely going to be using a lot of 2-year data, 3-year data to making decisions and see how the later planted versus the earlier planted is going to go, because plots are just now starting to go in.
Well, the good news from a selfish seedsman standpoint is that when we plant into May, even into later in May, we get better seed quality, higher germs, because we get physiological maturity later on, a little cooler, we get a little slower dry down, and that usually equates to thicker seed coats and higher germination. So I'm hopeful for next year that we see a lot of 95s and not any 85s, so.
So those are a couple of questions, or some of the things I've been thinking about this week.
Well, USDA came out with their reports this week, and there were a few surprises in there. They lowered the trend line yield for this year's crop by 4 bushels, which was a surprise. First time that for a long time that they've ever done that in May. So to lower the planting intent or the trend line yield in May is a pretty big deal. They did not raise the corn number as well as number of acres, so corn got a pretty bullish surprise. Now the other side of it is the demand for corn is going to be down slightly because of feed and usage and possibly ethanol demand because the price is so high, and will people continue to drive or not? All in all, still a bullish report for corn. Beans, just kind of a so-so report. They didn't really change a whole lot on soybeans, other than, again, we know that when we have a late corn crop going in, we usually have some delay in soybean planting as well. They're not really talking about that yet, but the shocker, again, for the 3 commodities was wheat. They lowered the estimates on wheat down 95 million units or bushels, and that was they lowered it to 95 from what the trade was expecting, and so wheat got a big jump in prices this week, and will continue to do so. But all in all, a pretty positive week for farmers. with planning reports were not negative in any way, and so pretty positive week. The only question or the only concern that I have was all the corn that's getting planted this week is going to throw us into a pretty narrow window for pollination in it, Ben.
Yep. That's why it's very important to have a package and not rely too heavily on one maturity. So when you do get it stuck in the ground, it's smart to have some, for our area, it's smart to have some 108-day stuff, some 112-day stuff, and some full season 114, 15-day products, because that pollination is going to be tight.
Yep. And don't forget, as we get later on soybeans, you can if you can narrow those rows down, 15 inches or narrower, that's like planting 2 weeks earlier in wide rows for yield potential, and start pushing the population up as we get into the end of May.
That's something we're definitely going to be paying attention to, because a lot of guys, I've had that question a lot, not necessarily this week, but do I keep my 15-inch soybean planter, or when I buy a new planter here, or do I buy a 30-inch planter? Well, if you're getting everything planted in April, the 30s do pretty well. I mean, you don't see much yield difference. But as you get inclement years like this and you're fighting stuff, this is going to be one that I'm going to stick in my memory bank. So when we're harvesting and you can potentially see a 3-4 bushel yield increase on 15-inch rows, there's going to be some value to that if that holds true.
And also weed control. I mean, canopy, faster you can canopy, the better your weed control. So you get a benefit there too.
Yep.
So anything else as we let these farmers get back in the field here, or if they're listening on podcasts, get back to their favorite station or whatever it is. So, well, that brings us to the corny jokes, and I got to tell you, last night I heard, the first insect or mosquito was in my ear last night, and I couldn't believe it, And
yeah, well, when we were out in the field yesterday, we had gnats, and I said, well, it's time to plant beans.
Yep. So I went into the local farm store and I said I was looking for some insect spray, and I grabbed a bottle and I asked, is this good for bugs? You know what they told me? They said, no, it kills them. So you got to be careful what you ask for. Okay.
Yep.
Got to be, today.
Yep.
The last thing I have is, did you hear about the two silkworms that had an argument? It ended up in a tie.
Yeah.
Ended up in a tie.
Silk tie, All right, well, enough of this. Let's get back to work. Again, thank you for watching or listening today by podcast. We appreciate your business. Hope that you and your family are safe and planning is progressing for you. We'll see you next week.